people, stay dandy, baby. Moraha'S backstory is finally revealed in the latest episode of Yashahime. This was an eye-opening episode of the series, if a little clumsy at times. I have a lot of contention with this episode, but I certainly got a lot of enjoyment out of it as well. Most of my enjoyment came from the fact that we finally got to learn why Moroha is a bounty hunter, and why she seems to be in constant debt to Jiubei, the corpse dealer. It's actually all tied directly to her backstory and her training with the Wolf Demon tribe. And while the last episode gave us some pretty big insight into the past, and learning that she was actually taken in by Koga and his clan, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to see Koga or Ayame or any of the other big members of the Wolf Demon tribe, but you are going to be introduced to a brand new character who goes by the name of Yawaragi, who is essentially the mentor of Moroha and is the one who looked after her and taught her to be the bounty hunter that she is in this series. And she's directly tied to the conflict in this episode, as she's been manipulated by none other than Kontone of the Four Perils in order to take down Moroha and her brand new friends. And this is all kicked off at the beginning of the episode. There's absolutely no precedent for it. It just sort of opens up with Moroha, Setsuna, and Toa as they're going up against this mysterious woman of the Wolf Demon tribe. I have a lot of umbrage with this, as there is no proper setup for it at all. They do establish why these two forces are going up against one another, but we don't really get to see how it all eventually gets to that point. It just sort of throws you right in, and then they just get you right into a big old flashback, which is arguably the strongest element of this entire episode. So let's talk about some of the bigger parts of this episode right here. So as I said, we actually get to go back in time and get to see when she was being trained by Yawaragi, who throws her in the middle of the pit of demons known as the Kadoku. This will look familiar to fans of Inuyasha, as we saw it in the previous series, but here she has been tasked with fighting against all of these demons and trying to win. If she can do this, then she can actually win the prize sword, the Kurika Ramaru, from Yawaragi. Man, saying all these weird Japanese things back to back is just one hell of a tongue twister, but just follow me here. So eventually, Moroha does win. The only thing is, the stipulation is that she didn't absorb all of the demonic power after this sort of like big demon free-for-all, and thus she didn't fully complete the challenge. And this is when Yawaragi decides to bring her to Jiubei, where now Moroha is going to work for him in order to pay off all of her debts. Now, one of the big reasons that this is going on is that there's this whole subplot which just sort of comes out of nowhere with Yawaragi, and the fact that she's wearing this armor which was created by the Fire Rats, the people who made like the robe of the Fire Rat. Basically, they make all of this mystical armor, and we've never actually seen them before until this episode right here, and as their name would imply, they're basically humanoid rat people who make armor. And it just so happens that she's wearing this cursed armor which is slowly compressing on her body, and over time, eventually it's just going to crush her completely, and the only way that she's going to be able to get rid of this is if she finds a very specific key from the Fire Rats. The problem is, she has to find them, and apparently finding them is pretty freaking difficult, as it takes her up of 3 years to even find them, except when she does find them, they've all been completely slaughtered by Kontone in this part of this crazy convoluted plan where he's going to give her the key to the armor, but first he has to kill Moroha, Toa, and Setsuna. And essentially that's what sets up the big confrontation in this episode. Like I said, to me it feels a little sloppy. For others, they might enjoy it, but I don't know, it kind of was hard for me to follow initially when I was watching it for the very first time. Still, it's a pretty simple episode in terms of its execution, and it ultimately leads to a really cool conflict and even more backstory of Moroha and Yawaragi. Like, there's this one big scene where we get to see where we learn that apparently this rouge is actually bad for her. Whenever she does this, it brings out in her innate demon abilities, kind of similar to when Inuyasha would lose control in the original show, except here that it's going to have a way more massive negative effect, as she's constantly going to lose herself to this power. In fact, they even bring up the fact that Kagome is the one who put some sort of weird seal on her to sort of like suppress all of these demonic abilities, so to speak, but Yawaragi has sort of worked a way around that and realizes that it can be released, and the more that she uses this rouge, the worse that it's actually going to get, and eventually she's just going to lose control. We even see in a flashback sequence where they're battling against another classic Inuyasha enemy, the Birds of Paradise, where she uses this rouge and basically just goes insane, and even not only kills all these things, but ends up injuring Yawaragi, even leaving 3 scars on her face, something that never properly heals, and is probably a constant reminder of the danger that Moroha could actually be to the world if she loses herself to all of her demonic abilities. It's also here where we get to see where she receives the fire rat armor for the very first time. A random weasel demon just sort of pops up out of the woods, as they usually do, and he sort of tricks her into taking this armor, which is going to make her more stronger. That's sort of the double-edged sword, and that kind of goes along with the title of this episode, where it does grant you a lot of power, but eventually the armor will compress and kill you. And we even get to see that she can summon cyclones to a really crazy degree, essentially making her very freaking powerful, but again, it comes at a pretty big price here. But basically, this entire flashback sequence is key to really getting some of the bigger moments at the very end of the episode, where Moroha takes it upon herself to battle against her former mentor without the use of using this rouge, which is really unique and a great way to build upon this character and make her grow just a little bit more. And it's also instrumental in her actually learning to use a brand new technique for the sword, which again is going to seem very familiar to fans of the original series, as it almost seems like this was perfectly planned, as if Yawaragi was actually trying to teach her how to utilize this signature technique. But essentially, she ends up attacking Moroha with one of her big cyclones, and that's when she starts to swing her sword around, and she utilizes the Crimson Backslash Wave. Of course, very similar to Inuyasha's Backslash Wave, except that it's crimson and it's red, so that makes it different. Essentially absorbing her technique, spinning it around into a giant tornado of fuckery, and sending it right back at her. Now, what's really cool about this scene is that she actually ends up grabbing onto Konton, who stupidly decides to show up on the battlefield, and basically is going to try to utilize him as a meat shield so that they can both be destroyed at the same time. But Konton manages to escape because he has the weird blue pearl. Maybe he's borrowing that from Riku, I don't know how that works, but the fact of the matter is the dude escapes, Team Rocket's blasting off again, and unfortunately, as quick as she's introduced, Moraha'S mentor does end up dying in this episode, but in doing so, has transformed the character of Moroha into something who's more than just a one-dimensional, fun-loving, kooky best girl of the series, daughter of Inuyasha and Kagome. She's grown into something a lot more interesting throughout the course of this episode, and that's something that I have to applaud it for. That and the fact that we do learn that her name actually means double-edged sword, and this goes perfectly with her overall abilities of having to constantly fight between being a human and being a demon, losing control of those powers, and utilizing them for the right cause. She's really powerful, but that power can end up having a massive effect on her as a person, both emotionally and physically. And in many senses, that actually made this a pretty damn good episode, but again, I do have some minor problems with it, and we'll talk about them just a little bit more in the rundown of the latest episode of Yashahime. So, like I said, there were a lot of things about this episode that I really liked. I love that we got to spend time with the Wolf Demon Tribe again, even if it really was only one member that we've never seen before. But still, it's remarkable to learn, and it was in the last episode, to know that Moroha was actually trained by them and raised by them. And I love that they have a lot of callbacks to the classic elements of the Inuyasha series, whether it's battling in the giant pit of demons, the Kadoku, or the Return of the Birds of Paradise, or even just following up on the fact that we get to learn that all of these mystical items are indeed created by rat demons. I mean, they've always called them the fire rats, but they literally are anthropomorphic rat people who unfortunately get nothing in this episode. They're basically just completely killed off screen by Konton, who again is showing that of the 4 perils, he's easily the most competent. I'm sure we're going to see more of them in the next couple of episodes. They are building up the fact that Takotsu is going to be returning in the series, who again is basically just the loud, brash muscle, with Konton being sort of like the brains of the operation. But again, they're the type of villains who are more of build-up before we get to the final confrontation of the series with Kirin Maru and all the other major villains of the show. But still, he manages to be a pretty fun villain overall, and his ability to manipulate all these situations is a little weird. But again, my biggest problem with this episode is simply just how it starts. Like, they're just there. They're meeting her. They're getting ready to fight. Like, we know that she was set up by Konton to try and find them, but there was no build-up to that. It just sort of happens, and you just have to sort of accept that that's the way things are actually going to be for this episode. And I don't know, it just sort of rubbed me the wrong way. It felt just like the storytelling to me in this episode felt a little sloppy, and it's not because it was all over the place in terms of going into the backstory and the flashbacks and everything and constantly going back to the present, but there's other aspects, like the fact that it really took this woman 3 years to find these fire rats. Was it really that freaking difficult? I don't know. It's a lot of things like that that you kind of have to just, get rid of your sense of belief when watching an episode like this. Again, it might sound like I'm really dogging this episode, but I actually really loved a lot of elements of it. In fact, I would go far as to say that this is one of the better episodes that I've seen in a while, and it even features some of the best animated sequences that I've seen from the show. This isn't the best animated show in the world in terms of artwork and animation, but there were certainly some really great standouts, especially in that big final battle between Yawaragi and with Moroha. I especially love the scene where she was running down the mountain and dodging all of the big attacks. There was some pretty solid choreography from her when she was scratching up Moroha. I just thought it looked really cool and really fluid when compared to some of the other big scenes that we've seen here. But really what's important about this episode is getting Moraha'S backstory and getting to learn her motivation behind being a bounty hunter and the person who actually trained her, how she obtained that mystical sword, the Kuri Karamaru. I think that's all pretty big information. I don't know. I felt like it could have been executed a little tighter. Otherwise, I still think this is an entertaining episode that all fans of the franchise should definitely check out, especially if you're a fan of Yashahime and you want to learn more about its main characters. This is a solid episode for Moroha, and she desperately needed some development, especially because, for the most part, this is the Toa and Setsuna show. Despite the fact that Moroha is the freaking daughter of the main characters from the original series, Toa and Setsuna really are the main characters of this show. Still, I liked this episode. Even with some of its faults, I got a lot of enjoyment out of it. Some big smiles on my face, and like I said, I enjoyed some of the action. So, I'm going to give this episode a 4 out of 5. Your thoughts may differ, however. You might think this is a perfect 5 out of 5 episode. You might think this is a 1 out of 5 episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below, talking about this episode, some of the big developments with Moroha and her backstory, and what you guys hope to see from the future of the Yashahime anime series. Let's talk about it. Comment section below. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. Please subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. Use your mystical fire rat abilities to hit that like button. It really helps out these videos a lot. It's easy to do. Just do it. Come on. I know you can do it. Come on. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. I want to take some time to thank my patrons. You guys are awesome, watching my videos, leaving comments, giving me great feedback, but you're going that extra mile and leaving me monthly donations, and I can't thank you enough for that. Remember, first-time donators, I'll review an anime series of your choice, as well as adding your name to this list of amazing people. You guys are the ones who make Ace Guru possible. Thank you so much. So there it is, my friends. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down there, baby.